October 24th, 2018, Saipan, Northern Mariana Islands. Category 5, Super Typhoon. U2 made a direct hit on Saipan and Tinian with 175 mph winds, the strongest typhoon on record near those islands by wind speed. 2 people were killed, over 100 were injured, the international airport was damaged, homes were destroyed. Vegetation was stripped from entire sections of islands. The communities of Saipan and Tinian spent months rebuilding. That was 2018. It was called historic. It was called unprecedented for those islands. Then on April 14th, 2026, less than 3 months ago, Super Typhoon Sinlaku made landfall on the Northern Mariana Islands with 145 mph winds and a 185 mph peak intensity. No deaths, but $1.5 billion in damage. And as of last week, Saipan and Tinian still had no power. 2.5 months after Sinlaku ravaged those islands, the shelters were packed. People had nowhere left to go. And then, on the morning of July 6th, 2026, yesterday, Super Typhoon Bobby raked across the island of Rota at peak intensity, 180 miles per hour. Sustained winds. A central pressure of 901 millibars. Radar imagery from Guam showed mesoscale vortices embedded in the eye wall, the same tornado-scale circulations blamed for the catastrophic damage of Category 5 Hurricane Andrew in 1992. The airport in Guam recorded 1231 inches of rain, a daily record. Saipan International Airport clocked gusts of 106 miles per hour. Guam International Airport recorded 100 miles per hour. That was yesterday. And right now, as you watch this, the strongest storm on Earth in 2026 is still running. It is still a major typhoon. It is tracking northwest toward Taiwan and eastern China. And the U.S. territories it just devastated are beginning their third major recovery from a Category 4 or stronger typhoon in 8 years. This is the story nobody in the continental United States is fully paying attention to. Let me change that. It is Tuesday, July 7th, 2026, day 188 of the year. And today, Weather Alert is covering a story that has been unfolding in American territory with more than 200,000 American citizens for the past 5 days, and that has received a fraction of the coverage it deserves, while the continental U.S. has been consumed by heat domes, derechos, and holiday weather. Super Typhoon Bobby is one of the strongest storms to affect U.S. territory in the modern record. It has devastated islands that were still rebuilding from April's Super Typhoon Sinlaku, and it is now targeting Taiwan and potentially southern China by Friday. Let me walk through all of it. Let me start with the specific numbers, because they are extraordinary and deserve to be stated precisely before anything else. On July 5th, Bobby completed its eye wall replacement cycle and recovered quickly, re-intensifying back to a Category 5 equivalent super typhoon with winds of 270 km/h as the storm grew its wind field. At 8:40 local time on July 6th, Bobby passed extremely close to the northern coast of the island of Rota, equivalent to a Category 5 super typhoon, becoming one of the strongest typhoons in history to affect the northern Mariana Islands. Afterwards, Bobby reached its peak intensity, with JTWC assessing its 1-minute sustained winds of 285 km/h and a central pressure of 901 HPA, 285 kilometers per hour. That converts to 177 miles per hour sustained winds, and a central pressure of 901 millibars, among the lowest central pressures ever recorded for a tropical cyclone affecting U.S. territory. Bobby hit Rota at peak intensity, 160 miles an hour winds with a central pressure of 910 millibars. This is quite close to the maximum potential intensity that a tropical cyclone can have under those prevailing atmospheric and oceanic conditions. About 200 millibars with a central pressure of 885 millibars, according to a graphic from the University of Wisconsin-Sims. It is quite rare for a hurricane or typhoon to reach its maximum potential intensity. All conditions have to be perfect, and the atmosphere and ocean make up a complex system where perfection is rarely achieved. Close to maximum potential intensity. That phrase deserves specific attention. When a tropical cyclone approaches its maximum potential intensity, the theoretical ceiling set by the available sea surface temperature and atmospheric moisture, it means the storm has extracted essentially all of the energy the environment can provide it. Bobby was not merely a strong typhoon. It was a typhoon running at near maximum atmospheric efficiency when it struck Rota. And the structural detail that caught my attention in Yale Climate Connections' Jeff Masters analysis published yesterday, the same Jeff Masters who was a hurricane scientist aboard a Hurricane Hunter flight that nearly brought down his aircraft in Hugo in 1989, was this. Just after Bobby passed through the northern Mariana Islands, radar imagery from Guam showed that the interior of the west eye wall exhibited a scalloped Appearance? Likely indicating the presence of mesoscale vortices embedded within the eye wall. These tornado-scale circulations were first definitively observed during a hurricane hunter flight into Hurricane Hugo in 1989 and have been blamed for some of the extreme damage observed in Category 5 Hurricane Andrew in South Florida in 1992. Tornado-scale circulations inside the eye wall. The same features blamed for Andrew's catastrophic damage. In a typhoon that struck U.S. territory with 180 mph and pH winds, while communities were still recovering from the last major typhoon that hit them 2.5 months ago, I want to spend a moment on the human context of this storm because I think it gets lost when the story is covered purely in meteorological terms. The Northern Mariana Islands and Guam are U.S. territories in the western Pacific Ocean, collectively home to more than 200,000 American citizens. They are some of the most geographically isolated communities under the American flag, thousands of miles from the continental United States, deep in the western Pacific, and directly in the path of the world's most active tropical cyclone basin. Guam and the Northern Mariana Islands are typically affected by tropical storms or typhoons 6 to 7 times each year. While typhoons can occur in the western Pacific basin any time of year, the season for the Marianas usually stretches from June through December, 6 to 7 times per year. These communities have been living with this level of exposure for generations. But what has happened in 2026 is not a normal year of exposure. It is a historic compression of major storm impacts into a single season. Super Typhoon Sinlaku struck in April with 145 mph winds and 185 mph peak intensity. Sinlaku killed 17 and caused about $1.5 billion in damage to the Northern Mariana Islands and Guam. Then, before full recovery could occur, before the power was even restored to Saipan and Tinian, Bavi arrived. From what I've heard from Saipan and Tinian, where many people still have no power 2.5 months after Sinlaku ravaged those islands, the shelters were packed and they had to turn people away. That quote is from local NWS meteorologist Landon Aidlet, speaking to NPR from central Guam at 1:30 in the morning during Bavi's approach, while the typhoon was still making landfall. Shelters at capacity, power not yet restored from the previous storm. Communities being asked to hunker down a second major typhoon before they had finished recovering from the first. The Port Authority of Guam suspended its operations, while dozens of schools and hospitals were likely to be affected, according to the NWS. And the specific line from Guam Governor Lou Leon Guerrero, who had already declared a state of emergency on July the 2nd before Bavi's landfall, captures the human situation with the precision that official language rarely achieves. We aim for 0 fatalities, and gosh, I hope that's how it turns out. It's going to be a rough night and a rough day. Let me document the verified damage picture from Bavi's passage because, as of this morning, July 7th, full damage assessments are still ongoing, and the scope of what happened is still being determined. Widespread damage is being reported on the islands, particularly Rota. Gusts of 106 mph were also clocked at Saipan International Airport and 100 mph at Guam International Airport. Guam International Airport also saw a rainfall total of 12.31 inches, which is a daily record. Rota took the direct hit. Local authorities on Rota said they had received reports of major damages, but the extent remained unclear due to difficult communications. The communications infrastructure on a small island that has just been struck by the eye wall of a 180 mph typhoon does not survive intact. The mayor's office on Rota sustained major damage. Power outages across Guam and Saipan were severe. Roads were flooded and storm debris lay in the streets. A general view shows debris washed ashore by high waves at a park in the aftermath of Super Typhoon Bavi in Guam on July 7, 2026. Motorists commute through a flooded road after heavy rain brought by Super Typhoon Bavi in Guam. A fallen tree blocks a road during Super Typhoon Bavi in Guam on July 6th. A car overturned after being flipped by strong winds brought by Super Typhoon Bavi in Guam. A traffic sign and broken tree lie on the ground after strong winds brought by Super Typhoon Bavi on July 6th. These are not descriptions from a hypothetical scenario. These are descriptions from AFP photographer Yuichi Yamazaki's on-the-ground images from Guam published July 7th, 2026. Cars overturned, trees blocking roads, storm debris washed ashore, flooded road system on a U.S. territory island still processing what Sinlaku did 2.5 months ago. The Federal Emergency Management Agency stated that they will support Guam and the Northern Mariana Islands as soon as the typhoon moves through. FEMA activated before landfall, with teams embedded with territorial officials, response centers activated, and water, meals, generators, and other critical supplies staged to move as soon as it was safe. That prepositioning is exactly the kind of federal response that saves lives. And the fact that it was necessary, again, less than 3 months after Sinlaku, tells you the operational reality facing these communities in the 2026 typhoon season. Here's the piece of the Bobby story that has the deepest scientific significance, and that is getting almost no attention and coverage focused on the damage assessment. Super Typhoon Baby is the world's third Category 5 equivalent storm so far this year. The first was Tropical Cyclone Horatio in the southern Indian Ocean in February, followed by Super Typhoon Sinlaku in April. 3 Category 5 equivalent storms globally by early July. Let me put that in context. The 2026 Western Pacific typhoon season has been extraordinarily active at the upper intensity threshold. The Western Pacific Ocean north of the equator is the world's most active tropical basin, which churns out storms all year but is most active between May and October. And the specific driver of Bobby's rapid intensification deserves documentation because it connects directly to the El Nino story. Weather Alert has been tracking since May. The super typhoon strengthened into a Category 5 cyclone over the western North Pacific on Saturday, July 4th, as it tracked toward the Mariana Islands. Atmospheric and ocean conditions are highly favorable for maintaining a high-end storm, according to the JTWC. High ocean heat content, low wind shear, sufficient moisture, and textbook outflow at the upper level of the storm. High ocean heat content in the western Pacific. The sea surface temperatures that fed Bobby's rapid intensification, sea surface temperatures of 30 to 31 degrees Celsius, warm waters that extend a depth sufficient to sustain a major cyclone, are measurably elevated above their long-term climatological averages. This is the same oceanic warming signal that we have been tracking in the El Nino analysis. The developing Super El Nino is not just warming the central and eastern Pacific. It is part of a broader global ocean warming trend that is providing the heat engine fuel for tropical cyclones to reach and maintain extreme intensities more readily than historical climatology would predict. Severe Weather Europe's code, red update from May 28th, documented that the twin Pacific tropical cyclones in April, including Sinlaku, contributed to the westerly wind burst that helped accelerate El Nino development. Now Bobby, formed in similar conditions over similarly warm western Pacific waters, is adding to that pattern. These storms are not independent of the El Nino story. They are part of it. Bobby is not done. As of this morning, July the 7th, the storm has moved off the Marianas and is tracking northwest through the Philippine Sea. And its next target, Taiwan and potentially eastern China, is a population center of tens of millions of people. On July 7th, at 15 hour UTC, as Bobby continues to track towards the Philippine Sea, it underwent another eye wall replacement cycle, causing the storm to weaken below super typhoon strength and its degradation of the central dense overcast. Eye wall replacement cycles are well-documented meteorological phenomena, where a concentric outer eye wall forms around the inner eye wall, cuts off its moisture supply, and causes the inner eye wall to collapse, while the outer one contracts and tightens. During this process, the storm typically weakens temporarily before re-intensifying as the outer eye wall completes its replacement. This is exactly what Bobby is doing right now. The Joint Typhoon Warning Center is predicting that wind shear will increase to a high level on Tuesday, reaching 20 to 25 knots. This should result in considerable weakening beginning on Wednesday, with the typhoon dropping to Category 3 strength, 120 milliliter winds, by Friday, July 10th, when it will be threatening northern Taiwan and Japan's Ryukyu Islands. Category 3 at landfall over northern Taiwan. That is still a major typhoon. Taiwan is an island of 23 million people. Bavai will track clockwise around a strong ridge of high pressure that is steering the typhoon and is expected to deviate from its current northwest motion, beginning to bend toward a more northwesterly track by Wednesday. The most likely track takes Bobby into northern Taiwan or Japan's Ryukyu Islands on Friday, July 10th, then into China south of Shanghai on Saturday, July 11th. South of Shanghai by Saturday, July 11th. Shanghai is one of the largest cities on Earth, home to approximately 24 million people. A major typhoon making landfall in the broader Shanghai region would be one of the most significant tropical cyclone events to affect China's eastern coast in recent years. The economic implications, Shanghai is one of the world's busiest ports and financial centers, extend well beyond the immediate meteorological impact. As Bobby moves farther northwest, its size could grow larger even as its winds are weakening, meaning a more expansive area of Taiwan and eastern China could experience at least tropical storm wind gusts by Friday and Saturday. Size growing even as intensity decreases. This is another well-documented tropical cyclone behavior. As a storm weakens due to wind shear or land interaction, its outer wind field frequently expands. A weaker but larger storm can affect a much broader geographic area with tropical storm force winds than a compact Category 5. For Taiwan, the practical impact is that even if Bobby weakens to Category 3, At landfall, tropical storm force winds could extend well inland across a large portion of the island. I need to briefly acknowledge another story happening in American proximity that deserves mention before we close today. On June 24th, 2026, a devastating earthquake doublet struck Venezuela. At 6:04 p.m. ET, an M7.2 foreshock rocked the northeast coast of Venezuela immediately, followed by an M7.5 main shock. The M7.2 and M7.5 doublet, a pair of similar magnitude earthquakes that are causally linked but seismologically distinct, destroyed buildings across the northern coastal state of La Guaira and the capital city of Caracas. The death toll from earthquakes in Venezuela rises to 2,954, with 16,592 people injured as of July 4th, 2026. And the USGS pager system has predicted the toll could potentially exceed 10,000 given building stock vulnerabilities in the affected areas. The main shock was the strongest in Venezuela since the 1900 San Narciso earthquake. This happened while the continental United States was focused on the July 4th heat dome. Nearly 3,000 people confirmed dead in Venezuela from the worst earthquake to strike that country in over a century. Northern Venezuela lies within a broad transpressional boundary zone between the Caribbean plate and the South American plate. Its principal active structure is the Bocano San Sebastián El Pilar fault system, which extends for more than 1,300 asymptotic kilometers from the Venezuelan Andes to Trinidad, and accommodates much of the dextral motion between the Caribbean and South American plates at about 10 millimeter per year. And in the Caribbean itself, the seismic monitoring network continues to show ongoing aftershock activity. Earthquake Track confirmed a 5.0 magnitude quake near Boca de Yuma in the Dominican Republic on June 26th, and a 3.6 magnitude event near Frederiksted in the U.S. Virgin Islands on July 4th. The UWI Seismic Research Center, which monitors the Eastern Caribbean, confirmed 28 quakes this week in the broader Caribbean region. The Venezuela earthquake and the Caribbean seismic activity are separate from the Bavi story geologically, but they are part of the same broader picture of a planet in active geological and atmospheric motion during the summer of 2026, a picture that this channel has been documenting since the frost events of May. Let me close the Bavi portion of today's video with a direct and honest assessment of what the Northern Mariana Islands and Guam are facing right now, because this is a U.S. territory story, and it deserves to be treated with the same urgency as any mainland weather disaster. These islands have now been struck by 2 major Category 4 or stronger typhoons in less than 3 months. Sinlaku in April left Saipan and Tinian without power for 2.5 months. Bavi's passage just added widespread new damage on top of incomplete recovery from the previous storm. The shelters that were at capacity during Bavi's approach were the same shelters that have been serving people displaced by Sinlaku since April. FEMA is on the ground. The governor of Guam is doing damage assessments. The NWS Guam office, which stayed operational through Bavi's passage, continues to monitor conditions. But the structural reality of recovery on a remote island territory, limited construction workforce, limited material supply chains, limited financial resources, means the timeline for full restoration of power, communications, and housing is not weeks, it is months. And typhoon season in the Marianas runs from June through December, with the Western Pacific's most active months, August, September, October, still ahead. The people of Saipan, Tinian, Rota, and Guam are American citizens. They are living through what no community should have to live, through twice in 3 months. And they need the attention, the federal resources, and the public awareness that any mainland disaster of this magnitude would receive. Here is what today's weather alert coverage means for specific groups of people watching. If you have family or friends in Guam or the Northern Mariana Islands, check in when communications are restored. Power outages are widespread. Cell service may be intermittent. The damage assessment from Bavi is still ongoing as of this morning. Be patient and persistent with communication attempts. If you follow the Western Pacific typhoon season, Bavi is now tracking toward Taiwan and eastern China as a major typhoon forecast to arrive Friday, July 10th. Yale Climate Connections and the Joint Typhoon Warning Center are the primary sources for Bavi's ongoing track. Watch specifically for any change in the recurvature timing. If Bavi curves northward earlier than forecast, Taiwan's northern coast takes a more direct hit. If it curves later, the brunt moves toward mainland China south of Shanghai. If you follow the Atlantic hurricane season, the contrast between the Western Pacific and Atlantic this summer is striking and meteorologically important. While the Atlantic hurricane season remains quiet, Bavi is the 3rd Category 5 storm of 2026. 3. Category 5. Equivalents globally by early July, with the Western Pacific accounting for 2 of them. El Nino's upper-level westerly winds are producing the wind shear that has suppressed Atlantic hurricane development. confirming the NOAA and Colorado State University seasonal forecasts of a below-normal Atlantic season. But, as the NWS director stated plainly, it only takes one storm to make for a very bad season. The Atlantic quiet does not mean absent. Bertha has been flagged for potential development. Watch for updates. If you follow the Caribbean seismic situation, the Venezuela earthquake doublet of June 24th killed nearly 3,000 people by the latest confirmed count, and may kill significantly more as collapsed building assessments continue. The Bocano San Sebastian El Pilar fault system that ruptured is a major active fault running 300 kilometers through northern Venezuela. It has not been fully relieved by the June 24th doublet. Aftershock activity will continue for months. The Caribbean Seismic Monitoring Network remains active, and the UWI Seismic Research Center in Trinidad is the primary monitoring body for the Eastern Caribbean. Super Typhoon Bavi struck the island of Rota in the U.S. Northern Mariana Islands on July 6, 2026, at peak intensity, 180 parentapors, sustained winds, and a central pressure of 901 millibars. Radar imagery revealed mesoscale vortices in the eye wall, the same tornado-scale circulations blamed for the catastrophic damage of Hurricane Andrew in 1992. Guam recorded 1231 inches of rain, a daily record. Saipan recorded 106 million gusts. The eye of the storm passed directly over Rota, described by Al Jazeera as causing major damages. The affected communities had not yet restored power from Super Typhoon Sinlaku, which struck in April and killed 17 while causing $1.5 billion in damage. Bavi is now a major typhoon tracking northwest through the Philippine Sea, forecast to threaten northern Taiwan on Friday, July the 10th, as a Category 3 equivalent with 120 pulirauber winds, then potentially making landfall in China south of Shanghai on Saturday, July 11th, a region that includes one of the world's largest cities. Simultaneously, 2,154 people are confirmed dead from Venezuela's magnitude 7.5 earthquake doublet of June 24th, the strongest earthquake in that country since 1900, with the USGS warning the toll could exceed 10,000 as building assessments continue. The Western Pacific is home to the strongest storm on Earth in 2026. A U.S. territory has been devastated twice by major typhoons in 3 months. Venezuela is recovering from its worst earthquake in over a century, and the Caribbean Seismic Network continues to register ongoing activity near the Dominican Republic and the U.S. Virgin Islands. These are American stories. They are happening now, and they deserve the same sustained attention that the continental U.S. heat dome and derecho events received this week. Weather Alert will keep covering them.